Did you ever hear the advice that you learn a language best by speaking it from day one? Obviously, a year abroad would be the best way to achieve it then, right? So when I went to study abroad in Japan, I thought this would be my golden opportunity to live by this advice. I threw myself into speaking Japanese every single day for an entire year, and it simply didn't work. But here's the thing, I still think speaking can help with language learning, but how can both be true at the same time? To explain this, I will take you through my year at the prestigious Senju University, where I learned the hard way that so-called early output isn't as universal as people make it sound. I went there at roughly JLPT and 4 level, determined not to waste a single second of my year abroad. I was going to speak Japanese constantly, immerse myself completely, and come back fluent. What actually happened was quite different and taught me some crucial lessons about when speaking helps and when it doesn't. Missing exposure and chances to talk were definitely not a problem. I lived in an international dorm with the whole purpose of intercultural exchange. Japanese as well as foreigners lived there together. Our daily lives were completely intertwined. I basically spent every second in the dorm in the common room or rec room where I tried to talk to people. And I noticed early on that my hardest challenge will be that most conversations in Japan are group conversations. Those resulted in a lot of situations where I sat with a group, everybody was talking, and sure enough, every time a lot of words I didn't know came up. It became one of the usual I know some of these words situations. So of course, I tried looking up what I didn't understand, but there was a fundamental flaw with that approach, because the conversation continued, and the moment I found a word's meaning, people were already talking about a completely different topic. That kinda made participating hard. It was a weird barrier. I wanted to get better by speaking, but to actually have a conversation, I already needed to be at a way higher level. I fared better with one-on-one conversations when people actually took the time to understand me and had experience with English. But I still always felt limited in what I can express and was by far not able to grasp a lot of details. I only had this very rough understanding due to what I previously learned, and at the same time I was only rarely able to take anything new out of these conversations. Even when I asked and people explained a word to me, I forgot it shortly after. The language classes felt like a different life, because there I understood most of the conversations and my mocks, even though they weren't the best, were rather good most of the time. And you can take a look at what we did there yourself right here, as I kept my original documents from back then. They focused heavily on output. Input seemed to be an afterthought, even though we did have some listening exercises and of course the usual conversation style exercises where we had to fill in the blanks, as well as grammar drills you can see here. Doesn't really look like something you would actually need to travel to Japan to get, right? Neither were the grammar explanations because, well, as you can see here, they just taught us the same I can find with any Google search in a matter of seconds, and it is still just the westernized version which uses exceptions instead of showing how the logic of Japanese actually works. Interestingly enough though, as I only noticed while going through my material again, they did try to explain the pitch accent to us. Even though I must say I don't remember them talking about things like atamadaka and so on and how each word has a pitch, but as I'm seeing here right now, they did mention it. Doesn't seem like they gave it a name, but you can see the usual pitch accent patterns here with an explanation. I personally can only recall how they gave us these squirrely lines here and told us to copy the pronunciation. On top of that were weekly kanji tests, and every now and then we had to do a presentation about a topic of our choice. To prepare the latter, we had to write a script first and hand it in for correction. Nowadays, the biggest flaw I see with that is that we simply didn't know how to talk about our hobbies. The course topics were stuff like family, vacation, going to eat and so on. What people talked about in these presentations were video games and similar specific things. So what were we supposed to base our writing on? We used the only thing we knew: Japanese words and grammar we could look up, and expressions from our mother tongue. The result was that most of the time our script came back entirely red. Look at my masterpiece here, for example. That of course gave us a little bit of insight into what we can say, but I'd say by far not enough to really make it stick. There was also the problem that we often simply didn't understand what they wrote there. Not really helpful to see a corrected expression, but not knowing how to read it due to either missing knowledge or handwriting we couldn't read. Not even to mention that sometimes meaning got lost in translation. The teachers thought that we wanted to say something different than we actually wanted to say. I mean, okay, it was good that we were allowed to write about our hobbies, but together with that, we would have needed direction on how to get better talking about it, as the course obviously wasn't able to cover everybody's hobbies. Might as well tell you to write a 3-page essay about your last vacation in Swahili right now. Afterwards I tell you, nah, that's wrong, that's correct, and leave it at that, while we never talk about the same topic again. What I really deemed weird was also the expectation. This was the course J2B. 1 was the lowest level they had, 5 the highest, meaning the course was at JLPT N4 level. Yet, as a comment to one of my presentations, they wrote here that it was a bit hard to follow for people who don't know games. Okay, I can accept that, but what are you supposed to do at N4 level? At that point, you are simply missing the needed knowledge to craft an easily understandable text about a niche topic. When it came to listening practice, I was able to grasp maybe 80% of it, probably mostly because those were tailored exactly to vocabulary lists, grammar and expressions we specifically learned in class, but that wasn't how a completely normal Japanese conversation would go. And when it came to learning something new, I have my verdict I wrote down back then right here. I mentioned in a survey that they threw too much new stuff at us at once. Interestingly enough, I learned later that this criticism is actually very valid, because if you think one should be happy about learning so much new stuff in a short time, then you should know that language acquisition theory had already proven back then that the best way to learn something new is with sentences in which only one word is new, meaning them throwing a wall of unknown stuff at us wasn't a very effective teaching method. Every now and then they also invited some of the Japanese students, which we then had to interview. This was mostly done with a pre-made script though, and everybody just used phrases we already learned in class. If the Japanese students strayed too far from the script, the teachers reminded them to stick to it. Which is a very weird approach. We tried to understand natural Japanese conversations, but the teachers made sure they don't speak as they normally would. We also sometimes learned a bit about a topic and then had events where we had to use what we learned, like for example learning words and phrases about cooking and then having a session where we cooked together with the Japanese. This was probably some of the more useful stuff we did in class. I at least remember that this was the point when I remembered the word mazelu, to mix. But the thing is, I took these courses for 9 months, but never had the feeling that I got better at the language. I passed their classes, but when they tried to put me into the next higher level, it all broke down, and my classmates began complaining about me because they deemed I was holding the classes back. In hindsight, I think they just found a good black sheep in me, because they would have needed to do way more to progress with their language skills outside of class anyways, and those were the short-time students who, unlike us long-term students, had Japanese roommates. Us long-term students on the other hand were always paired with other foreigners. My last 3 months, the teachers told me they don't have enough people for my level, which according to their placement test was still at the beginning of JLPT N3. So they asked me if I want to take private classes, which I declined out of frustration because it never felt like these courses were helpful. This also shows in my later tests where I just didn't bother anymore to learn the specific course material. I learned a lot of vocabulary I never actually needed, so I wasn't able to understand anybody better when I tried to talk about my hobbies. Even after months of these classes, I just sat in conversations in an izakaya or similar situations and thought, I understand a few words, but not the sentence. It seemed like this was the limit of what was possible, and I never saw a way to go beyond that. When I tried talking with Japanese, often they just looked at me and simply did not understand what I was saying. Probably because, well, I used what I was able to, Japanese words and grammar, but German expressions. Communication was barely possible, and only later did I find out that this was to be expected. If I don't understand what people are telling me, I won't learn anything. I can only remember things when I actually understand what was said, in one way or another. And in Japanese, it is very hard to grasp things from context alone when you don't have enough experience with the language already. My own experience was the result of all of this. I understood what I previously learned anyways, but I wasn't able to improve beyond that. But when you try to acquire a language, you need to understand way more than any course has the time to teach you in a lifetime. An example. Even if I know the words for to meet, bed and I would still not be able to understand the meaning of the sentence, which literally translates to I met bad eyes. Unless of course I looked up before what it actually means. Something bad happened to me. In general, it kinda seemed like these courses told us something about the language and then just hoped that we make our actual progress outside of them without ever telling us how to do so. Meaning, you found out yourself what you need to do or you fail. But as some people always manage, it makes it easy to blame the students themselves for not getting better instead of the course. And this experience is the very reason I don't think learning by just talking to people works with a language like Japanese, which is barely related at all to the mother tongue of people in the West. But as I said before, I think it can work if the language you're learning is closely related to one you already know. Like, I myself never learned Danish, not a single word. Yet, if I hear a Danish sentence like Kunne du gentage det, which translated means can you repeat that, I am still able to guess the meaning of some of the words. Mainly, I would be able to say that kunne is probably can due to it sounding very similar to können, which is how you say can in my mother tongue German. And du, meaning you, is actually the exact same word as in German. That also almost sounds like the German das. If I would combine that with a bit more focused learning about the language, I would probably be able to jump into a conversation with a Danish person and improve my language skills simply due to me being able to guess the meaning of the words I don't know yet. This is probably a very effective method to acquire a new language. The problem here is though that this learn a language by speaking is always thrown around as a universal way to learn a language. Like it's the same no matter which language you want to approach. But this is doing a disservice to motivated language learners who try to get into a language like Japanese, for example, where, as I experienced, that method simply does not work. The languages are just too different. For a language like that, you would need way more knowledge and experience with it first before you reach a point where you can grasp the meaning of unknown words with context alone. I mean, even foreign words they imported often sound way too different for me to be able to recognize them, or are used completely differently, like the German aufheben, which in German just means pick something up, but in Japanese means something along the lines of improve yourself. This is probably also one of the reasons why I failed with French during my high school years. I wanted to learn that language. Don't judge me. Arthur est un perroquet. But as a Romance language, it already had less in common with my mother tongue, which belongs to a Germanic language family, than English, belonging to the same family, and with which I got good enough for normal conversations with, without even noticing. This is why I'm always saying, if you wanna learn Japanese, you need to read and listen a lot with the help of a dictionary first, so you learn to understand the language. This is the basis of all communication. If you don't understand what somebody is telling you, you might as well listen to a group of birds chirping, as it would have the exact same learning effect. None. Now the question remains, knowing this, how should you approach learning Japanese? To explain this, I made a video where I talk about how I would approach learning the language if I had to start over nowadays. You can see it on the screen right now and watch it by clicking on it. And with that I say, ciao and see you next time.